China did not become powerful by selling the world one product. It became powerful by becoming the place where the world learned to make almost everything. For decades, if a company wanted cheap production, huge factories, fast scaling, suppliers nearby, ports connected to global routes, and workers who could turn designs into real objects, it looked at China. Phones, toys, clothes, furniture, electronics, solar panels, batteries, tools, machines, car parts, drones, cameras, and millions of ordinary products passed through Chinese factories before appearing in homes around the world. That was the old story, China as the factory of the world, but the new story is much more dangerous for its rivals. China no longer wants to be the place where other countries make their products. It wants to be the country that designs, brands, finances, ships, and controls the future industries themselves: electric cars, batteries, solar panels, high-speed trains, drones, robotics, AI models, apps, e-commerce, ports, rare earth processing, industrial equipment. China is trying to move from made in China to powered by China. That shift is one of the biggest economic changes of the 21st century. The old China made the world comfortable because it was useful. Western companies could design products, outsource production, and keep the highest profits. Consumers got cheaper goods. China got jobs, factories, roads, ports, and know-how. Everyone understood the deal. Then China started climbing. At first, people laughed at Chinese brands. They were seen as cheap, copied, low quality, forgettable. China was the place that assembled the iPhone, not the place that created the next Apple. It was the production floor, not the boardroom. That image is now outdated. Chinese companies are building electric cars that scare German automakers. Chinese battery companies sit inside the global energy transition. Chinese solar manufacturers dominate the supply chain. Chinese drones became normal tools for creators, farmers, soldiers, and filmmakers. Chinese apps proved they can shape global attention. Chinese factories are no longer only cheap. Many are fast, automated, and brutally efficient. The world did not notice the moment China stopped being just a factory. It noticed when the factory started producing competitors. That is why China makes other powers nervous. A poor manufacturing country is useful. A rich manufacturing country is dangerous. A country that can make cheap goods, advanced goods, and strategic goods at the same time becomes a system-level rival. This is the Chinese advantage. Scale plus state direction plus industrial depth. Scale means a new product can be tested inside a huge domestic market before going global. State direction means the government can push capital, land, subsidies, infrastructure, and policy toward chosen sectors. Industrial depth means factories, suppliers, engineers, logistics, and components are close enough to move fast. When those three things work together, China can move at a speed that shocks slower economies. The electric car market shows this clearly. For decades, foreign car companies treated China as a gold mine. German, American, and Japanese automakers sold status to a rising middle class. Volkswagen, BMW, Mercedes, Toyota, and General Motors all depended on the Chinese market. Then China changed the rules. Electric vehicles reduced the importance of the old combustion engine advantage. A car became more about batteries, software, screens, supply chains, charging, and price. That opened the door for Chinese companies like BYD, Geely, SAIC, NIO, Xpeng, Li Auto, and others to challenge the old giants. Suddenly, foreign automakers were not just selling to China. They were defending themselves inside China. This is why the EV story matters. It is not only about cars, it is a preview of what China wants to do in other industries: use its domestic market, industrial policy, and manufacturing scale to build companies that can compete globally. If China can do that with cars, it can try to do it with robotics, batteries, solar, drones, industrial software, and AI hardware. The solar industry already shows the pattern. China built such a strong position in solar manufacturing that many countries now depend on it for the energy transition. The world says it wants clean energy, but much of the equipment needed for that transition runs through Chinese supply chains. That gives China power in a field that was supposed to reduce dependence on old energy empires. The same is true for batteries, electric cars, grid storage, smartphones, laptops, drones, and future energy systems need batteries. Chinese companies have become central to that world. CATL is one of the clearest examples, a battery giant that sits inside the future of transportation and energy. This is China's new industrial strategy in one sentence: dominate the boring physical layers behind the glamorous future. People see the electric car. China wants to control the battery. People see clean energy. China wants to control the solar panel. People see online shopping. China wants to control the factory and logistics behind it. People see AI. China wants the data centers, chips, power systems, robots, and manufacturing capacity around it. That is not old-style cheap labor. That is strategic infrastructure, but China's rise did not happen because the free market randomly selected it. The government played a central role. It built highways, ports, railways, industrial parks, power systems, universities, and entire city clusters designed around production. Local governments competed to attract factories. Banks directed credit. Policy targets pushed industries forward. Workers moved from villages into cities at a scale the world had never seen. This was not smooth or gentle. China's rise was built on intense labor. Migration, pollution, debt, land seizures, local competition, and an enormous social transformation. Hundreds of millions of people moved into the modern economy, but the price was also heavy: crowded cities, environmental damage, inequality, pressure on workers, and a political system that demands stability above almost everything. China became the factory of the world by compressing a century of industrialization into a few decades. That speed created wealth, but it also created stress. The property crisis is one example. For years, real estate helped power growth. Local governments relied on land sales. Families treated apartments as savings. Developers borrowed aggressively. Cities expanded. Concrete became a growth model. Then the model cracked when property slows in China. It is not just about apartments, it affects household confidence, local government finance, construction jobs, steel demand, banks, and the feeling that getting rich through real estate is no longer guaranteed. This matters because China's old growth engine was built on exports, investment, construction, and urbanization. Some of those engines are now weaker than before. That is why the country is pushing so hard into new industries: electric cars, batteries, solar, AI, robotics, chips. Advanced manufacturing and domestic consumption are not just exciting sectors. They are replacements for an older growth model that cannot run forever. But replacing a growth model is extremely hard. China can build factories faster than almost anyone, but it also faces overcapacity. When too many companies chase the same strategic sector, they produce more than the market can absorb. Prices collapse, margins shrink. Some firms survive only because local governments do not want layoffs. Exports rise, but other countries accuse China of flooding markets. This is already happening in parts of the solar and battery worlds. For China, overcapacity can look like strength because it creates cheap products and global market share. For other countries, it feels like an attack on their own industries. That is why tariffs, trade barriers, and industrial policy are coming back. The world liked Chinese efficiency when it made consumer goods cheaper. It likes it less when Chinese companies threaten domestic jobs, automakers, factories, and strategic sectors. This is the new trade war. It is not only about tariffs. It is about who gets to build the future. America wants to slow China in advanced chips and AI. Europe wants cheap green technology but fears losing its industrial base. India wants manufacturing investment but does not want to be overwhelmed. Southeast Asia benefits from supply chains moving out of China while still depending on Chinese components. The Gulf buys Chinese technology and energy systems. Africa gets roads, loans, telecoms, and trade, but also worries about dependence. China is everywhere because the physical economy is everywhere. That is its strength. It can sell to poor countries, rich countries, authoritarian states, democracies, companies, and consumers. It can build ports, install telecom equipment, export cars, finance infrastructure, ship solar panels, and supply online marketplaces. Its influence does not always look like military power. Often it looks like a container, a loan, a construction crew, an app, or a battery. But China has a weakness that America does not have in the same way: trust. Many countries want Chinese products, but they do not always want Chinese control. They want the price, the speed, and the infrastructure, but they fear surveillance, debt pressure, political influence, supply dependence, and the possibility that technology can become leverage. This is why Huawei became such a huge geopolitical issue. It was never only about telecom equipment. It was about whether the digital infrastructure of other countries should be built by a company linked to China. The same fear appears with apps, data, AI, ports, electric vehicles, and critical minerals. China wants to be indispensable. But the more indispensable it becomes, the more other countries look for ways to reduce dependence. That is the paradox. The stronger China gets, the more the world tries to diversify away from it, but diversification is not simple. Companies can move final assembly to India, Vietnam, or Mexico, but many components, machines, materials, and supplier networks still lead back to China. Leaving China is easy to say in a political speech and difficult to execute in a factory. China's industrial ecosystem is not one factory. It is a dense web built over decades. That is why de-risking usually means reducing dependence at the edges, not instantly replacing China. The country also has a demographic problem. China's population is aging, and the labor force is no longer the endless advantage it once seemed to be. For decades, China had cheap workers and huge migration into cities. Now wages are higher, the population is older, and young people are under pressure from expensive housing, job competition, and uncertainty. Youth unemployment, low birth rates, and social pressure all matter because China's development model depends on confidence. People have to believe that work, education, and discipline will lead to a better life. If that belief weakens, the social contract becomes more fragile. The government knows this. That is one reason it pushes national pride, technological self-reliance, and the idea of rejuvenation. China's rise is not presented only as economics. It is presented as a historical comeback after humiliation, invasion, and poverty. The message is that China is returning to the center of the world. This emotional story is powerful. It gives the country energy, but it also creates risk. If people are told that China must rise, then economic slowdown feels more threatening. If the world resists China's rise, that resistance can be framed as containment. If domestic problems grow, nationalism can become a tool to hold confidence together. This is why Taiwan is so dangerous. Taiwan is not only a political issue. It sits at the center of the semiconductor world and at the center of Chinese national identity. For Beijing, Taiwan is unfinished history. For the United States and its allies, Taiwan is part of the balance of power in Asia. For the global economy, Taiwan is a chip supply shock waiting to happen if conflict ever breaks out. China's rise cannot be separated from this tension. A country that becomes more powerful also becomes more willing to challenge the old order. The United States built the current system after World War II. China benefited from that system, then grew large enough to dislike parts of it. Now the two countries are locked in a long competition, not a simple Cold War, because their economies are still connected. Not a normal rivalry because the stakes involve chips, AI, energy, military power, currency, technology standards, supply chains, and ideology. The world is being asked to trade with China, rely on America for security, and somehow avoid choosing completely. That is the pressure of the new era. China is not trying to become another America. It is trying to prove that a different model can win: state-led capitalism, industrial policy, political control, national scale, and technological ambition without Western-style democracy. If China succeeds, it changes what developing countries believe is possible. It shows that a country can get rich, build infrastructure, produce technology, and challenge the West while keeping tight political control. If China fails, it becomes a warning that manufacturing power alone cannot solve demographics, debt, trust, innovation limits, and political rigidity. The truth is probably more complicated. China is already too important to dismiss and too troubled to romanticize. It has world-class factories and serious debt problems. It has advanced technology and strict censorship. It has massive exports and weak consumer confidence. It has high-speed trains and polluted regions. It has global companies and political limits. It has incredible state capacity and a fear of losing control. That contradiction is the whole country. China's future will not be decided by whether it can build more things. It already can. The deeper question is whether it can build a system where innovation, trust, consumption, and global influence grow without being suffocated by control. Factories can be commanded. Creativity is harder. That is China's next test. The country mastered production. It is now trying to master invention, branding, software, design, finance, and geopolitical influence at the same time. If it manages that, China becomes more than the factory of the world. It becomes one of the main architects of the future. If it cannot, it may remain incredibly strong in physical production but struggle to convert that strength into the kind of trust and cultural power America still has. This is why China is so important as a story. It is the country that made globalization cheap, then made globalization nervous. It gave the world affordable products, then built companies that threatened the world's old champions. It lifted hundreds of millions of people, then created new pressures that no government can easily hide. It became essential. And that is exactly why everyone now wants a backup plan. China's power is not simple. It is not just factories, not just communism, not just exports, not just TikTok, not just EVs, not just control. It is the combination of all of it. A civilization-sized state trying to turn manufacturing depth into technological power before its old growth model runs out of time. That is why the world watches China with both admiration and fear. Because China already built the factory of the world. Now it wants to build the factory of the future.